Shalom guys, welcome back to another episode here at YASHAV Ministries with YASHAV. Like I always tell you, if you like the content that we have on our channel, like, subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, put them in the comment section down below. Welcome back. I hope you guys have had a good week. We're going to talk about the Torah portion for this week, which is Noah. We're in the book of Bereshit or Genesis, and we're going to talk about... We talked about Shabbat last week. We talked about creation. We talked about God putting everything together and the blueprint of Him organizing His creation the way that He wanted it. We understand eventually in the following chapters that as Adam was put on representation of God, he dishonors God by bringing disobedience. And we also see how they have kids, Adam and Eve, and Cain and Abel. Their story is of them bringing offerings to God. And interestingly enough, the text implies that God had favor over one and not the other. But when you go into the Hebrew, it doesn't say anything about favor. It establishes that in the process of Abel bringing his offering, just as Cain did, Cain was jealous because God looked also on his brother. And from there, jealousy and hate, Cain kills his brother, and man starts to deteriorate. But out of that root of creation of Adam, there's men of God who obey God or who follow God or represent God. And so it takes us in a genealogy in the following chapters until the chapter 6, where it enters Noah. And we're going to read about Noah, we're going to learn about Noah, but we're also going to understand the context of the flood and what transpired and what was the mentality of that time, and was just the account of Noah what existed in the time, or if there was other accounts of the flood. Okay, so before we get started, let's do the Torah blessing. Baruch Adonai HaMevorah, Baruch Adonai HaMevorah Leolam Ba'eh, Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, Asher Bahar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, Venatan Lanu Et Torato, Baruch Adonai Noten HaTorah. Bless Adonai who is blessed, bless Adonai who is blessed now and forever. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from among the peoples and has given us the Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, who gives the Torah. Amen. So if you see me enunciating my words, it's because the youth said that I speak too fast and I don't move my lips enough. So, all right. So this week's Torah portion is Noah. So let's get started. So we're going to do the PowerPoint first, and then we'll get to the reading, because we want to get down with the points. And then we'll see the text, and we'll go on from there. Okay? Let's go to the reading. So Noah, Torah portion Noah, starts on Genesis chapter 6 verse 9 through chapter 11 verse 32. The Haftorah portion of the prophet's portion is Isaiah chapter 54 verse 1 through chapter 55 verse 5. And the Brit Hadashah portion of the New Testament portion is Matthew chapter 24 verse 36 to 46. Beginning centuries before the book of Genesis took shape the story of a massive destructive flood. It was circulating in form in Mesopotamia. As the tale was read, or more often recounted through centuries of family and community gatherings, and transformation occurred that shaped the details of this telling to the culture of the audience, right? So it's establishing that in the time of Noah, or in the time that the biblical account is being narrated, there is also an account similar to this flood in Mesopotamia, and the story of the account obviously transcends generation after generation in communities and in families, and it is shaped based on the culture and audience of the time. Okay, and so this is something that we have to pay attention, because Noah story sticks to what the text says, and it has a specific purpose. God is an objective God. He's trying to portray and bring a message not only to that time, but to us who are reading. Okay, now The biblical flood story, God is distressed with the behavior of the people whom he has created. In the monotheistic setting of Genesis, it is his decision alone to send the flood and to preserve Noah and his family alive. He is portrayed as resigned to this course of action, which is sadly the only appropriate response. The Mesopotamian version derived from a polytheistic culture and therefore portrayed the gods deliberating in council. The decision to send the flood is portrayed as a reaction of angry frustration. As the story progresses, the gods are duplicitous and short-sighted and absorbed in pity and squabbles. And so we're trying to see now culturally how the people of the time saw gods or God himself, and how their creation accounts, as we saw last week, and how their flood account match or how they differ. But it's interesting that they do have an account for what happened or what came to be. And so the difference here is the objectivity and the subjectivity of the story. You saw in the beginning that their story changed based on the family, audience, and generation. And their flood came from multiple gods counseling, angering, frustrating, and eventually they came up with the decision of just flooding the earth and judging the people. God objectively says, these people that I have created have turned and have become evil and have followed evil thoughts and evil actions, and this is why they have to go through this judgment. The hero, right? And this is what we're going to compare, right? Noah as the hero, and then obviously the Mesopotamian narration of the hero. Okay, Noah attracts God's attention as one who should not share in the fate of the rest of the population, right? So this is why God establishes Noah as separate. In the Mesopotamian story or accounts agree themselves that the plan of the gods was that no one should survive, despite the fact that they were sworn to secrecy concerning the plans of the assembly. So the gods were the only ones that deliberated on what was going to happen to the fate of humanity, and they decided it, and they didn't speak to humans or the creation, right? Which is completely different to what God does. God says he's going to make this decision, and then he says, okay, I will speak to Noah because we'll get into that later, okay? But it says, one of their number, Ea, successfully carried out a scheme so that his favorite human would learn of the coming flood. He then instructed him secretly how to keep his knowledge hidden from the gods, the rest of the people, and survived the 7 days of the flood. His boat resembled a temple and saved not just his family, but various skilled workmen, so that the arts of civilization could be preserved. Genesis and Mesopotamia accounts. It is safe for us to conclude that there is parallels between the biblical accounts of the flood and the Mesopotamian stories, being so numerous and detailed, are much more than results of mere coincidence. In the Bible, the flood is a climatic turn in a larger history of humankind that begins with the history of the world. So that's what we saw last week when it came to Genesis. God's blueprint, its manifestation based on his word and how he established it, and then men's function in it, and then we see man's fall in disobeying God's structure. Okay, and so it says here the identical situation is presented in the Sumerian, Arthur Hess's, and Bero's story, and it is reflected in the Sumerian king's list. But the crucial part in the Bible from all the versions is the deliberate divine decision to save the hero, which is communicated to him directly, right? So God speaks to Noah and tells him what's about to occur and why it's about to occur, okay? And God gives him detailed instructions. In the Mesopotamian tales, humanity was supposed to have been completely wiped out. the rescue of the hero in Mesopotamia happened accidentally by the impression and deceitfulness of one of the gods acting against the intent of the other gods. The motivation of the deities in causing a flood is not recorded in the Gilgamesh or the Berosus, but in the Artaxerxes, the flood is the god's solution to the tumult of mankind, which is increasingly disturbs them. Okay, now we're going to go into the reading and we're going to see God's reasoning, right? Because we have just had a little bit of information on how the people saw their flood account and how they envisioned and how the gods argued and how they were in council and they were angry. And so these is men's imagination establishing control of how creation came to be. But God in Genesis, in Bereshit, in the story of Noah, establishes why the flood came and why he decided to do what he did. Okay, so let's listen to what God has to say. So it says the following: Ele toldot Noach ish sadiq tamim haya bedorota et ha-Elohim hit halech Noach. And in English it says, these are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Noah walked with God. Noah became the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with violence. God looked on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. Then God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. And behold, I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make the ark with rooms, and you shall cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits. Its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and finish it to a cubit. The top and the door of the ark in the side of it, you shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. Behold, I, even I, bring the flood of water upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, in which is breath of life from under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall perish, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your son's wife with you, and every living thing, all flesh, you shall bring to every kind into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be a male and a female, of the birds after their kind, and of the animals after their kind, and every creeping thing of the ground after its kind. 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. As for you, take for yourself some of all food which is edible, and gather it to yourself, and it shall be for food for you and for them. Thus Noah did according to all that God commanded him. So he did. Now, interestingly, Genesis 9, when we read it in the Hebrew, say, Ele toldot Noach ish sadiq tamim haya bedorotav. Okay? And it's interesting because Elohim says, the reason why I have put my eye on Noach is not because he is a heroic man, because he is a Sadiq. The term Sadiq describes one whose conduct is found to be beyond reproach by the divine judge. Okay? But the other interesting word that I didn't know was tamim. The term tamim is mostly found in ritual context. It describes a sacrificial animal that is without blemish. Exodus 12 verse 5 and Leviticus 1 verse 3 and 10 establish this word. When it is applied to a human being, tamim acquires a moral dimension, implying an unblemished moral fault, hence a person of unquestionable integrity. So as we see, Noah was chosen because he lived a moral life in the middle of chaos that was worthy of Elohim putting his eye and recognizing that Noah was Zadik and Tamim, meaning he was unblemished. His personality and his reputation was irreputable. And he was just. And he lived like Elohim envisioned men to live. And we see that God put everything in order. Adam brings chaos. Cain brings chaos. And now mankind have corrupted themselves. And there's only one man, right? Elohim then goes back to square one. Genesis 1. Chaos comes down on the people. The flood. And God starts over with Noah. But why does he start over with Noah? And it's interesting because now Noah has his family and they enter the ark. And when we understand the definition of Noah's name, which is rest, we go as a family into the rest. The protection, the covering, the ark represented God's protection, God's temple, God's refuge for Noah, which Noah becomes the new Adam in a way, right? New creation. All men die, but Noah and his family. Humanity was judged by God. And God makes a promise that, and a covenant that it won't happen again. But at the end of the day, why did it happen? And why was Noah chosen to not be submerged into this chaos? And the answer is because he chose to stand out. And it doesn't implement or it doesn't imply that he did it with those intentions. It implies that he was living correctly. And God saw that he was just and unblemished. Now, it's interesting because our society is based on popularity or who's cool or who's more relevant. And Yeshua gives us a vision of this, right? And when we go to Matthew chapter 24, verse 36, if I'm not mistaken, it says the following. So Yeshua obviously is being asked of his return, and he's explaining what will happen in the time of his return, right? And he says, "Behold, I have told you in advance about false prophets. So if they say to you, behold, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. Or behold, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe them. For just as the lightning comes from the east and flashes even to the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end to the sky to the other. Now, learn the parable of the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and put forth its leaves, you know the summer is near. So you too, when you see all the things, recognize that he is near, right at the door. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But of the day and the hour, no one knows, but even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone." Now, everybody gets very into what we just read. But it's interesting because he says, "For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving into marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. And there will be two men in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. The woman will be grinding at the meal, and one will be taken and one will be left. Therefore, be on alert, for you do not know which day your Lord is coming. Now, again, we're establishing here about the coming of Messiah, right, Yeshua. But he points out how humanity will be so distracted in their life and what they do and what they believe to be what's important in that moment in time, that they will miss or they will be late for the coming of the Son of Man. Because once Noah entered the rest inside the ark, they noticed that something was going to happen. And we talked about last week how the Shabbat is that time, and the feasts are those times, those appointed times that you go and you are with Elohim, and you are in a sacred time and space that he established from the beginning, the times and the seasons. And it's very important, because as simple as it is, we repeat these things year by year, week by week, but one day it will kick in, and those that are consistently righteous and unblemished, obeying God, will be in the ark, and those that are not will be out the ark. And so the question is where you're going to be, because your obedience to the instructions, just like Noah did everything according to what God established to him in the moment. Noah was willing to obey. Noah was righteous and unblemished. What does that take? It takes obedience. It takes you being different. It takes you standing out. And maybe standing out doesn't mean that people will notice, because nobody noticed until Noah got in the ark. But you will stand out because you will be in the ark, and you will be building the ark, obeying God, creating that sacred space, that time, that place where people can come if they need. But if we don't do it, who will? I always like the verse that says that humanity is waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. So Noah was that manifestation. Thanks to his righteous behavior, Sadiq, and his unblemishedness, creation had a chance to survive. And the same with Moses, and the same with Yeshua. They had the opportunity to follow God's will. Yeshua says, they're going to tell you I'll be doing this, or they're going to tell you I'm over here. But remember, I will do and I will come when the Father says I will. And you will live according to what the Father says you will. And as long as you were doing that, you'll be inside the ark. So, enter the rest. That is the goal. Enter Noah's rest in the ark, which is Elohim's protection and guidance. So, be Sadiq and Tamim. It's hard. It's going to take a lot of work. But obedience, consistency, we probably might not reach. But I feel like the effort and the desire to do so will be what shines that light to the world, and what shines the light into Elohim's grace. And he will see that we're doing our best to be that person in the middle of chaos that is willing and that is worth preserving life. Okay? So I hope you guys read the Torah portion. We only read one chapter. There's 3 more chapters to go, so 4. Yes, I think 4. Yes. So read them. Ask questions to your parents. Have fun. Hope you guys have a great week. Shavua Tov. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.